Chapter 19. The Lost Tunnel. Chet left the storekeeper staring open-mouthed at his cryptic remarks. The stout boy had never moved faster than he did in those next few minutes. Bursting breathlessly into General Smith's home, he was met by the officer, who was just turning away from the telephone. "Chet, we must find Frank and Joe at once." "What's up?" Chet replied, stopping short with the photographs in his hand. The look of worry on the general's face alarmed him. "Mr. Hardy has uncovered the identities of our enemies. I've just had a message from his home. He's flying down here. Bush and his men are bank robbers, wanted on the West Coast," he continued. "They're fully armed and they're deadly. If we don't get to Frank and Joe immediately, we may never see them alive again." Meanwhile, the Hardys had covered a lot of ground. After hiding the car in a grove of trees, they started their search along the north bank of the rocky run, nearest to the plantation buildings. "Suppose you look for signs of a tunnel along the shore, Joe," his brother suggested. "I'll keep my eyes open for Franklin trees, or other clues a little distance from the water." The boys started upstream, carrying a shovel and a spade. Every little crevice among the rocks, every depression in the ground, was carefully probed. When an old stone fence indicated they'd come to the end of the plantation, Frank and Joe switched places and started back to recheck before crossing the stream. They continued the search, looking at every tree and every inch of ground until their backs ached. Finally, Frank called to a halt. He went back to the brink of the stream, bent down, and splashed his face with cool water. The refreshing pause sharpened his senses. Taking in a deep breath of woodland air, he remarked, "Smell that sweet honeysuckle?" "Honeysuckle?" Joe repeated. Suddenly his eyes lighted with excitement. "Frank, maybe what we smell is from the blossoms of a Franklin tree." "Joe, you're a whiz! But I didn't see any Franklin trees on this side of the—" "Let's look on the other side of the stream," Joe interrupted excitedly. Following the direction from which the sweet scent seemed to be coming, they crossed the rapidly swirling water and pressed several yards into the woods. Suddenly, Frank spotted something. "Follow me," he cried, scrambling through the brush. He and Joe reached a beautiful tree whose fragrance scented the woodland. Although the branches seemed to be decaying in several places, its leaves were large, with beautiful white blossoms, and there were no other trees around like it. "Maybe this is it," Joe cried. "The only one left of Beauregard Smith's favorite trees," Frank murmured in awe. "Come on." Starting at the base of the tree, the boys made ever-widening circles, probing every inch of ground as they went. "Hey, look at this," Frank said, as he came upon a large mossy mound close to the stream. Opening his knife, the boy peeled off some of the thick green sod. Underneath a layer of earth, he found a brick. The boys began to dig away the sod furiously. A few minutes later, they'd uncovered a vault-like enclosure. They loosened the bricks in the front one by one. Finally, they'd made an opening large enough to squeeze through. The daylight, which penetrated the darkness below, revealed old stone steps leading downward. "The lost tunnel! The arsenal!" Joe exulted hoarsely. Frank was just as excited as his brother, but he warned Joe, "Keep it down. We don't want to attract any of Bush's men. Yet." Joe was already leaping down the steps, and Frank was close behind. They found themselves in a musty cavern. Both boys whipped out their flashlights, and then halted in amazement. "Cannonballs!" Frank exclaimed. "Look, there must be 100 of them." The balls were piled in a huge pyramid in the middle of the dank cave. "But I don't see any gold," Joe said in disappointment, straining his eyes to catch every detail of the place. The gloomy tunnel was a natural rock cavern, which apparently had been enlarged for use as a storehouse. The Hardys went to the end, about 50 feet ahead. The exit was solidly blocked with stones, bricks, and earth. There seemed to be no evidence of the Smith fortune or the bank's gold anywhere in the cavern. Unless, Frank said, "Joe, I have it. You remember the message? Find coin in iron?" He dashed toward the entrance. At the same moment, the sunlight was cut off. There came a sound of men's voices. Chilling words were projected into the tunnel. "You've had your last chance, Hardys. We warned your father. Smiley, light the fuse." End of chapter 19.